Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Evangelista, and I'm a gallery assistant with the Maryland Federation of Art. And I am here to introduce one of our juried artists, Palden Hamilton. Palden shares his belief that all things are observed through veils of memory, meaning, and other meditations of the subjective mind. Thus, the results of what each artist tries to portray can greatly vary. We will take a look into Palden's figure, still life, and plein air work, and dive into how he expresses his representational interpretations of reality. I'd also like to briefly introduce our host, Will Scott. He is an art historian who bridges the gap between artists and the public. I wanted to introduce how I got to know Palden to you, Will. So Palden was actually one of my teachers at MICA, and I still attend his workshops at Zoll just about every Wednesday. Try to go at least a couple times a month. So it's really exciting for
Great,
me
great.
to come from MICA and now be a part of MFA and get to see Palden as one of our juried artists for Paint Annapolis. So this will be a really
Mhm.
fun talk.
And I should
Well,
say that one of the reasons I'm familiar with the Zoom format is unfortunately Marissa was in my class during one of the COVID semesters where we were almost exclusively online, if I'm recalling correctly. And so
yeah,
it's a sort of a flashback to that, although I'm glad I've gotten to know Marissa in person since.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Well, she's a tremendous help to us, to me and to us at the MFA. And when she moves on, we'll dearly miss her in all ways. So I'm glad that she's with us. And now I'm going to do something, and she knows I'm prone to do this kind of thing. Marissa, is there any question you ever wanted to ask Paulden that when you were a pupil you didn't feel comfortable asking? You can ask it now.
Oh, it's an interesting question. Not in particular, but there is something that may be interesting for this topic. So, Paulden, we have discussed a little bit about how doing plein air is kind of like magic in a way, and you had such a beautiful explanation to this about how you're almost preserving the life of the moment with plein air painting. And now, Will, I know in photography, there's a saying about how photography is like capturing a dead moment. Um, so I'd be really interested as an artist to hear about how you guys might discuss that. And that could be maybe a much longer discussion in the future, but that's something
Yeah,
I'm
in the
interested in.
future. But yeah, that's a great question. And Paul, and that's what one of the things Marissa brings to this is it's not just she's doing the technical work and the sort of setup and keeping me on track, but she often has these kinds of really excellent questions, thought-provoking questions. So if you want to go first, I'll go after.
Okay. Well, that is a good question. That's a rich question. I've been thinking about that a lot. I feel like painting, I every once in a while have to really sit down and question myself about what it is that originally got me to paint. I think, and I've traced it back. I try to trace it back to the most sort of fundamental, um, sometimes sort of archaic sources. And I think there is something magical about taking an experience and sort of embedding it in stone, which is essentially, paint. I think of it as powdered mud. It's ground up rock, sort of suspended in some kind of vehicle, and then it dries, and then you have an object. So it's a person's hand, it's a person's mind and eye, preserved, hopefully for a long time. And so I think that's something that I find magical about painting. And what I've noticed, I've historically been more of a studio painter, and got more into plein air in the last 15 years. And I've noticed that a lot of paintings that I do in the studio, certainly paintings that I've done from photographs, where I have an unlimited time frame, and I'm sort of in the familiar environs and around surrounded by familiar objects, I can't necessarily recall when I later look at images what went into the process. I can't really remember the stories involved with making that painting. Whereas with plein air, when I go on location to paint, I always remember with uncanny clarity where I was, who I was with, the conversations I had with them, associated stories and smells and sights from that day. So to me, that indicates that I really was present in those moments. And every time again I look at the resultant image, I there is that sort of magic of an experience that's um, sort of imbued in the physical object.
Palden, that immediately resonated with me, partly because Marissa's question was a very good one, and I was thinking about that while I listened to you. But before I want to say anything about my own reaction to that, on your website, you referred to your work as souvenirs of your experiences. And that seemed very much like what you were saying in a more fulsome way just now. But does that apply to all of your work? Because I do want to talk just momentarily about some of your other work as we go along.
That's a good question. So I would say it's work that I've done from live observation, and that could be. I like to be as complete a painter as I can be, so I try to not sort of limit my subject matter to things that I know extensively about or know how to paint, and so I paint people, places, and things.
Yeah.
I also when I work from models, although it makes things difficult logistically. I think technically it makes them harder, but I do like to be in the presence of the person, place, or thing that I'm painting. And when I work from life as opposed to from photographic reference, I find that similarly, yeah, the experience is sort of imbued in the picture, and I can really, being with a person, I feel like it's really important to be in the presence of the person, the thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the place where I am. So, good question.
Well, that really makes sense, but it still comes back since we're talking about Paint Annapolis and plein air work. It's almost like even if you've only started to do that more recently, that it's just part of the way that you interact with the world. I mean, you're experiencing it, you're recording it on your canvases. So I'm really excited to see what it is that you produce while you're in Annapolis. But before we
Yeah.
go on and look at a couple of your works, I do want to respond to Marissa's question. Um, in photography for me, I have a little bit of a kind of it's not a stumbling block. It's sometimes it's very helpful and sometimes it's a stumbling block. Being a trained art historian who studied with a noted scholar on early American art photography, sometimes that stuff, and Paul, I'm sure it happens to you. You think of an artist that you've looked at, admired, been interested in, and it kind of filters through even when you're not conscious of it. And so that happens to me a lot. But more specifically to Marissa's question, the one of the two people credited with inventing photography as a medium, a man named Henry Fox Talbot, referred to photography as fixing a shadow. And to me,
Mm,
that's really what I'm doing. You expose the negative or you open the sensor and you get an image and it's frozen, like you were referring to that, Paul. And
mm,
then when you go to for me, it's digital photography. So you go to the monitor, you go to your software, your processing package, and it's like you're painting brush strokes. But what I find in the end is once I'm finished, feel like I have the finished image, then it's not mine really anymore, unless I'm the only one
mm,
looking at it. And so it's
mm.
alive, it's a living thing. It's not a fixed shadow, except in that one sense that it's that one moment when you capture the image. And after that, it's constantly moving, growing, changing, and depending on who's looking at it and the experiences they're bringing to it. And I think of as an observer that painting is the same way. You don't have control of what it means once someone else sees it.
Exactly. That's a good point. And so I guess you don't have hangups about seeing your work off into the world for that reason. Is that I don't know
No,
because
and not at all. Not at all. I'm
mm,
happy to have it out there. And the one thing I miss is that I've never really promoted myself hard or concentrated on sales. And so when it's exhibited, it's often exhibited sometimes even in another country, but definitely in another place. And I don't get to stand there quietly in the gallery and overhear
mm,
what people are saying. I take every opportunity I can to do that because I think it helps me understand how I'm what it is and how it is being passed on to rest of the world, whether people are engaging or not.
Right. I do feel like I'm not attached to my paintings. If somebody recognizes some kind of, magical quality about it, and would like to have it, I'm always just honored. I don't
Yeah.
have a problem seeing them off. Even paintings of my own kids, I would say that it's the experience that's precious. And then if somebody, were to buy it, I'd be, again, honored if they had it. But I feel like, yeah, it's really about the moment. It's about the experience. I mean, I think a lot about, how much of my sort of an image maker, how much of my image making is about the process versus the result. And I have to say that the resultant image sometimes is a little bit arbitrary. It is about the painting of it. It's about the action. It's about
Yeah.
yeah, the experience again.
Yeah. Well, let's look at a couple of your works that we've loaded up to share with people when they see the video. I don't know if this is the kind of thing or something that you sent along to the juror for Paint Annapolis, but boy, this says Annapolis and seaports and sailing and all of those things all at once, and it's so energetically painted. Where did you find this image, and did you submit it to the juror?
I did submit this. This was actually painting from Plein Air Easton last year, and it's is sort of like an archetypal
Yeah.
sort of Chesapeake scene. And I so I painted this on location on a very, very hot day, and I set up under the shade of a catalpa tree at the edge of this
Uh-huh.
marina. And I consider my indoor work mostly dominated by shadow, where there's a lot of a lot of shadow inside with precious moments of light. But this one felt a little uncomfortable for me in that the sunlight was sort of bleaching 90% of the picture. And those are situations where I'm sometimes not entirely comfortable. But again, part of this idea of plein air for me is to, yeah, step into the light physically,
Hmm.
and then also in terms of just my aesthetic, just calibrating to lightness. So this painting was definitely an extreme of sunlight.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you can feel the intensity of the sunlight, and not because you chose, yellows and oranges and, sunlit color, so to speak. It's just the vibrancy of the blue and the red and the even the green. But the thing that strikes most obviously, to me at least, is the vigor of the brush strokes. And I guess my question is that because of like loose gravel or sand or something, and the movement of the clouds in the sky that did that, or was it the intensity and the heat of the day, or why? Because it's not what I see in the other
Mm.
things that are on your website.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I mean, there are many things that draw me to plein air. One thing that I have a hard time accepting is the constraints. And I've come to, it's not my idea, but adapt this, just delight, I'd say, in the, or try to delight in the parameters of the exercise. The main one in plein air being time. And
Hmm.
I'm a studio painter. I like to invest, 3 sittings or maybe more in paintings in the studio. And so with plein air, it was hard for me to let go and not say to myself, okay, I can come back to this scene tomorrow if the light's the same, or come back, for the next week. And
Uh-huh.
so usually it's on day 4 or 5 of a plein air event when I've let go some of my nerves and some of my tendency to control, which you see manifest in a lot of my studio work. It's
Hmm.
pretty controlled. It's pretty thoughtful. It's built up. Um, but usually when it's day 3, 4, or 5 of a plein air event, and I hope that it happens sooner than later, where I just let go of control and be like, whatever happens, it needs to happen in a 2 hour span, starting now
Hmm.
and ending in 2 or 3 hours. And everything that I would eventually do, I have to fit into that time. It definitely affects my brushstroke. So I think there's sort of an energy in the brushstroke, but actually the color um, that that I think happened nicely in this painting. there is something about the texture of the gravel and using sort of a brush loaded with different colors and chaotically thrown
Hmm.
on,
Hmm.
uh, as opposed to, more classical method might be to drop down sort of a tone for the ground and then scumble or dry
Yeah,
brush different layers over top. So I'd say that it's about the subject matter and it's also about the time constraints
yeah,
that
yeah.
are affecting the brush strip.
Well, thanks for that very straightforward response. And after seeing what's on your website and the studio pieces, the figure pieces, and those things, I can see how that's what caught my eye. This is so different,
Mhm.
but there's a cohesiveness. It's not like you were struggling and finding your way and sort of fighting with yourself because you're in this different environment. Instead, you've embraced it, just as you were talking about. I don't know if this was on the last day or the first day, but it's that cohesiveness that I think is impressive, given the fact that you're very much a studio painter when you want to be, when that's where you are.
Yeah, thank you. I do feel like this one I relaxed into it. Perhaps the fact that it was like 100 degrees and I was very
Yeah.
uncomfortable. Again, that sort of helped me shoot from the hip more. And that's really what, in the larger scheme of things, that's what I need to work on with plein air. I sometimes refer to it as like the plein air fairy. And sometimes the plein air fairy lands on my shoulder and other times she doesn't. And if I want it to happen too badly, I scare her away. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Be careful what you wish for.
Right.
Okay, let's look at the next image, Marissa.
Mm.
I frankly, I always fall into this. It's not really important whether I like your work or not. It's what you have to say about it that's important here. But as soon as I saw this, this is the kind of thing I would take a photograph of.
Mhm.
And you really have, I think, captured all these different colors and the sh forms. It's a very complicated composition, but it all hangs together. So when I look at this, the art historian in me, the wheels start to turn. And so I'm just going to ask it in this broad way. Are there any of the so-called, the canon of great American painters that you've looked at and admired and in any way affect your work? I mean, I could tick off a couple here based on my historical knowledge, but that's not what we're really after today.
Well, I would say increasingly Bellows is somebody who's appealed to me a lot. And I haven't historically been a huge fan of the Ashcan school. Maybe it is a little bit raw for me, but I'd say just in the last even 6 months or year, that's been appealing more and more to me. Whereas before I perhaps liked more sort of, beautiful scenes, but yeah, I feel like I'm going to keep talking about all these multifaceted goals I have with plein air painting, but coming to further to more appreciate and love scenes that maybe are not places that I'd even want to be, or this was sort of a lonely corner in Atlanta. I was doing the Olmsted plein air event in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and there was something about the light sort of raking across this dilapidated street corner with the cinder blocks in the foreground that I loved. But I would say, Bellows is and I do love Hopper also.
Yeah. Well, I'm not making this up. I'm sharing my truth with the audience too. The guy that I referenced that was a scholar, was my mentor, who was a scholar about early American art photography. His other academic specialty was American Realism and Robert Henry. Are you familiar with Robert Henry's
Oh
work?
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Sure, the eight, that whole approach to painting vigorously, not painting in a tight academic fashion. That's that's what I'm into when I'm looking at art. So
Oh,
this
nice.
is a great painting. This is really, there's so many good things that you've done here that I certainly appreciate. Do you know Henry's work?
I wouldn't say
Do
extensively,
you-
but I know.
no,
Mhm.
I wouldn't say this. In fact, what triggered it was you're talking about bellows. Uh, there's a whole series of paintings that Henry did in the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania. That's really the
Mhm.
region up around Scranton. Some of his
Mhm.
very best landscape paintings. And you have here in the vigor of your brushwork, but your use of light and shadow, it, it, I think they would have loved you. They would
Oh,
have thought,
that
hey, come on, let's go have a drink and talk about painting out of doors.
oh,
Uh,
those kind
so
words.
where
Thank
is
you.
this one? Where is
This one
this?
is in North Baltimore County, actually not too far from Pennsylvania. I do love like the New Hope School, which I've sort of happened across later in my career. Um, yeah, North Baltimore County, not too far from where I live.
I was just going to say, I think this is a really fine landscape. You know, it's you're not caught up in trying to capture all the details of the architecture. It's the whole environment and the atmosphere that you've created with color and light.
Mhm. Yeah, this painting was fun. Speaking of stories, I there was a woman, it was an agricultural center, and there was a woman on a walk who stopped and talked to me about all manner of things, mainly religion. And she hung out for 2.5 hours. And we talked the entire time I did this painting in an area that I'd chosen in part because it was remote and I thought I would just sort of be able to quietly observe. But again, it was serendipitous. I actually really loved our discussion. So, yep.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic that you mentioned the New Hope School. I actually grew up about 15 miles south of New Hope on the Delaware River. And when I was say, junior, senior in high school, some of us would go up to New Hope and hang out and act like we were hippies. We were being cool and we were really with it. But that's because it's an artistic community, with lots of artists and art galleries and music and theater and all that. So, great place to be. Why don't you just talk about this? Pillars,
Okay.
what's that mean? What it is? Because I could go off on a real art historian's jag if I say any more.
Okay. This was part of a series of work I did a couple years ago of my kids' sidewalk chalk. I
Uh-huh.
do, there's a number of reasons I was drawn to it. I think because it was around the house, I think there was something about the formal qualities, just these kind of cylinders with facets. I like the color and I like the way the sort of the pastel texture of the chalk sort of absorbs color and in an interesting way. And I was also perhaps just playing with my own use of paint. Oil paint has a tendency to be oily and slick. A lot of alla prima
Yeah.
paintings have that sort of juicy quality. But I wanted to play around with this sort of dry, absorbent texture. It was also uh, the in the academic tradition, as 18th, 19th century artists trained their understanding of light and form through doing cast paintings and cast drawings. So paintings of classical sculpture, um, plaster casts, and something about how beautiful it is to see a plaster form in a controlled light scenario with a single light source. There's something very beautiful about it. And so I was drawn to it just strictly aesthetically, but then also as I painted these chalk paintings, they did almost look like the ruins of some, ancient civilization. I was thinking sort of like sun bleached, columns and tumbled onto the floor in like
Hmm.
Ephesus or something. So I have some that are, I'd say, a little
Was
more
there
obvious.
anything deliberate about your color choice? Were you trying to challenge yourself or communicate something through the color, or was it more or less random that you chose those colors?
Mhm. I think that was, I tried to get a broad sort of array of all the colors. Uh, so I didn't necessarily pick them in that specific arrangement or order, I would say. But I'm curious to hear your interpretation, if you have one.
Yeah, yes, I do. Because knowing, as you mentioned, that in classical training, ever since the 17th century at least, uh, artists have often been in academic studios taught to begin with a series of shapes, elemental shapes, and move them and arrange them. And as you referenced, the light, where the light falls on them and on different surfaces and textures. But knowing that, and then hearing you actually nail it down, that was part of what was in the back of at least the creation of this. Um, you have given it that resonance that you referenced about ancient architecture and crumbling temples and columns and all of that. So it's the way that I think still life should be. It's not just how lifelike you can make an image, but can you make
Mhm.
those innate inanimate objects say something more or suggest something more. So it's
Mhm.
really, to me, it's a classic in every sense of the word, still life painting. It's wonderful.
No, thank you for sharing those thoughts. Yeah, I think that's insightful. I like that, I am trying to, I like my still lives to be sort of, controlled setups and somewhat humble in their scope, but I do
Mhm.
think maybe subconsciously, maybe not, I'm trying to sort of decipher, I'm trying to learn something about the broader world and think about these things. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yep.
Uh, I asked at the last minute for another work to be included, and did we get that racked up? Oh, I forgot all of these. This is just a classic, a classic studio semi-nude.
Mhm.
You referenced that you do this regularly. Um, is this the kind of, I mean, and this is so different in every respect from plein air painting. Uh,
Mhm.
which way is your career moving, and is it intentional? Are you moving away from the studio towards plein air, or are you just broadening out to include plein air more regularly in your work?
That's a really good question. I'm trying to figure that out. I mean, perhaps the hope is that I would take all these elements and then somehow combine them in pieces that I might do, that might be like allegorical pieces that I do in part from observation and part memory, part imagination. I feel like I'm constantly sort of like information gathering, I guess, when I'm painting any subject.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps the hope is that I'd be able to sort of like internalize a lot of, how the world works, the anatomy of the figure, the way light falls on form, and with the hope of then sort of recreating that in maybe narrative pieces. I'm not quite sure. I think no matter what I do, though, I think I'd like it to be part of my practice to do both and just continue to go
Mhm.
outside and
Mhm.
work on that aspect of my game and my mind. And then, yeah, again, this is very classical. This is a little more. I was mainly educated as a figurative artist, so working all day from the figure. At the end of the day, I really feel like the figure, the human face and figure, it's the most fascinating uh, thing in the known universe, the most fascinated, most complicated, most loaded subject matter.
Yeah,
I've taught life drawing and figurative painting at Micah and Zoll Studio for years, and I premise the figure as being the most beautiful but potentially ugly, or the most
yeah,
attractive but repulsive. It's everything,
yeah.
and so painting the figure is a very sort of loaded, intense experience.
Well,
This is some of my
I'm
friend
guessing that you're
so
familiar with John Singer Sargent's work.
oh yeah, I love Sargent.
Are
Yeah,
you familiar
he's
with?
a hero of mine.
Yeah, okay.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
love him more as a figure painter or as a landscape painter?
Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, he's sort of like a consummate, just like genius painter. I really, I sometimes when I evaluate painters, I think of like kind of like a DJ, kind of like a, a music producer with like different, switches positioned certain ways, where they've
Uh-huh.
sort of prioritized certain things. And with Sargent, I just feel like everything's kind of turned to 10. It's just he's so technically brilliant. Feels like deep feeling. It feels immediate, but you know, just fully informed by at least Western's painting history. He's like on another level. So I
Yeah.
that's not a good
Well,
answer. I love his landscapes and his
no, it is a
figures.
good answer. I think it is a good answer because I think just the brief look that I've had at your work on your website, especially some of your landscapes, little forest scenes, I saw a couple. I actually thought you must be somebody who's familiar with Sargent's later landscape paintings. your handling of the brush, your sensitivity to light and shadow. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and I think it's very impressive. And now I don't think we have time to. There's a couple other very fine figure bases and things that were racked up, but let's go to that last one. Paul, just take this and run with it. I think this is just a wonderful
Okay.
painting, and for a lot of formal reasons, subject, everything just kind of comes together. So.
This, like the other painting of the back, is of my friend Larissa, who actually Marissa knows, and she is sort of like been my muse for years. And I have to credit the poses to Larissa, who I think has a great sensibility and just great sort of body awareness. She loves classical painting and just knows what translates well into painting. And she chose to bring this sort of gauzy cover and just struck the pose, and it was so beautiful. I have a studio in Mount Washington in North Baltimore that was built by an artist named Gladys Goldstein. The entire upstairs was built as a painter's studio, so it has this large north-facing skylight. The idea being that with a
Yeah.
north-facing light, you don't get direct sunlight throughout the day. There's always this sort of cool, consistent light from the north sky. Um, and so there's something beautiful and sort of cool and powdery about the way the light, I sometimes think of as an analogy for light is like powder, sort of gently snowing down and accumulating on objects. And those planes that face most perpendicular to the light source, like snow on rock faces, that's where it sort of accumulates. So there's something about the figures that I do in the landscape or still lives that have some of that feeling of sort of powder coming to accumulate, um, like on her shoulders and her head. And I just think it was just a beautiful, timeless pose. I just love simple, contrappostos. And um, so I have to credit her for being a really beautiful subject.
Well, it strikes me too, given the way that I look at art because of my training. It is a timeless pose, and it's a timeless pose in a historical sense, but it's also a timeless pose to me because she's so natural. I mean, I wasn't really surprised when you said that she's been modeling for you for a long time. So there's a kind of a naturalness of your relationship. She's not just some person that you hired for, a day to come and model. So there's nothing forced or artificial about it. It's a really wonderful painting. Not quite what I would associate with plein air every time, but it's a beautiful painting. You really seem multifaceted, and that's impressive in its own right.
Yeah, thank you for saying. Again, I think your comments are very insightful. I mean, I think that in part what is different is I mean, I guess the fact that it was done over many sittings. I think the light, like I was talking earlier about interiors tend to favor sort of shadowy areas, and then the light is more precious. And so outdoors, the light is
Hmm.
abundant. Oftentimes, plein air paintings are capturing sort of the intensity of like high contrast sunlight. But here the light is just so precious and again like snow as opposed to sort of like a strong bleached raking light. At the end of the day, I would like my indoor work and my outdoor work to reconcile, but sometimes they feel like very different things.
Yeah, yeah. I'm fascinated by the small still life objects that you have on the counters or the shelves back in the darkness. They still have a presence, a mysterious
Mhm.
sort of presence, even. This is just fascinating. It looks like you did it for fun, but that it turned out to be a fascinating image.
Yeah, this was like a fun departure for me. I guess in the fact that it is on a flat white background, I wanted to play around with juxtaposing things that had sort of form and a certain color vibration with the absence of vibration, meaning kind of flat color and sort of flat application, like with a roller. These were a pile of clothes. This was part of a series just before the sidewalk chalk series, where I'd taken
Hmm.
my daughter's old clothes and was going to donate them to Goodwill, and I just thought this would be a nice way to commemorate them. So there's a little bit of a story behind it. I was also, again, interested in kind of the formal qualities of the colors and the textures. And for me, who tends to be more of a tonal painter, uh, more of with a more of a classical sensibility, the low chroma, this was a nice way to sort of shock my system a bit and try and push color
Hmm.
further,
Okay.
because of, kids' clothes tend to be these very saturated colors that I don't always approve of, but they were it was it was good for me. Again, I'm trying to see the light side. I'm trying to see the colorful side. That's part of my mission in life. So
Yeah.
it helps me.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, this one really worked because it just feels buoyant. I mean, some of that is because you chose the white background, of course, because so they sort of seem to float in air, but it just has a real vibrancy, a real kind of uh, strong and very pleasant imagery and resonance to me. And I think the one that I'm really waiting for is next. Well, that's not the one I thought it was going to be, but this is a lovely painting. It's kind of like the eternal woman. And it
Mhm.
kind of, it's like, it's almost like a little classic grotto that she's posed in. So who is she and where is she actually posed? Or is it a studio piece with a background that you created for it?
Well, I do like you again. Your comments are um are insightful. She is kind of more like every woman. I think historically, the way I've painted it, it's been really important for me to capture the specifics of um, the individual sitter, and I've really pursued likeness above all other considerations for large portions of my career. And this was an opportunity to uh, paint a bit from memory, a bit from imagination. I had started this from a model years ago, and then during COVID, um, I brought out some of these paintings that I really didn't know what I was going to do with, had no intention to necessarily finish or ability to finish because of my, uh, I would say, insistence on working from life, and
Mhm.
I didn't have photo reference for this. So I just started taking a face and a head and then imagining a pose, imagining a bit of a narrative, which I can't say is fully formed, but also this painting did have some history to it. I think it was painted over several pre-existing paintings, and through the subsequent layers of building up and sometimes sanding or scraping down, this um, a facade of this mysterious building sort of started to emerge.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I feel like, the pose is almost sort of cute, or they're like 1950s, but then up against this what looks like crumbling ruins, there's a sort of this a strange mystery, I guess, between her youth and the ancientness of her surroundings. And I don't quite know who she is, but I thought she was interesting.
Well, it's kind of like, and I mean this in a very positive way, and I think we're past the point of um, saying the name of a French academic painter of the 19th century is a bad thing, which it was when I was in graduate school. It's kind of
Oh,
like
yeah, yeah.
you like that stuff, you're really gonna you want to study that, but it's kind of to me. I hope you recognize the name Bouguereau.
Oh, yeah, I
Bouguereau's
love.
Candied Nudes, and but this is like a contemporary Bouguereau in the best
Mhm.
sense. This kind of beauty and mystery all rolled up together without the artificiality of a Bouguereau, which I think was
Mhm.
his real failure.
I started to talk about my pursuit of like the specificity of models. So which I think in part is a result of being into sort of 19th century academic painting. And then perhaps I feel like now our sensibility, even in the painting world, is so influenced by film and photography, which tends to be specific unless you try to sort of deliberately sort of obfuscate things with lighting or atmosphere. But I was just
Hmm.
more recently got more interested in looking back at sort of Greek or even Egyptian sculptures, which I feel like are not driven by sort of a pursuit of capturing an individual, but trying to capture the essence of sort of every individual. So your comment about it being sort of every woman, I like that you said that because I wanted to sort of have that sense of generality.
Yeah, well, I think you did it. Uh, Marissa, before I ask you to go forward, is there only one image left?
Yes, and I believe it is the one that you asked for.
Oh, good. Well, before you go there, just let me say that, Palden, I'm really impressed at the breadth of your work, and I'm anxious to see your work at Paint Annapolis. But I want to end with this one to kind of, well, I want to know why, for one thing, and how you do these. But it just shows the kind of range that you have. You could just show this by itself, and it's a beautiful still life painting. But I see the specimen board. Are you interested in insects, or is it just something that you did on a lark, or why?
I'm interested in them. I could come at this from a couple angles. I feel like what first drew me to, um, I guess, drawing as a kid was, and I think I have this on my sort of artist statement of sorts on my website, is that as a kid, I was felt this sense that the nature outside my bedroom window, the forest, was sort of vast and ancient beyond understanding. But taking little pieces of nature, little minutia of nature, like dead leaves or bugs or a dead bird on the porch, and drawing it in graphite was I would really feel a sense of connection to that mystery. Um, I think that eventually that pursuit sort of evolved to become more of kind of a scientific interest. So when I was at the Art Institute of
Hmm.
Chicago, where I got
Hmm.
my undergraduate, I actually gravitated a lot toward the illustration, my illustration classes, which were more sort of, I feel like, rooted in observation and creating, representational art, whereas the painting department was more conceptual and didn't interest me as much. And we would go to the
Hmm.
Field Museum, just the Natural History Museum in Chicago, and we had access to all these incredible, yeah, like all these incredible specimens, birds, insects. And throughout my life, I collect natural objects. This was from a beetle collection from that my father gave me from Thailand that we got in Thailand when I was a kid. And then I've amassed a bunch of bugs and skulls, and I have a cabinet of curiosities, like a Wunderkammern in my room. And I also, for my figure drawing class, I read an excerpt from Law's Guide to Nature Journaling. I believe that is what it's called, which is that, it could be considered an act of love to devote time and attention to something, be it a person or, a child, or when drawing a little piece of nature, a bug or a flower, from observation. So I feel like there's something in really observing these small bits of nature that it really engages me. It makes me feel connected to nature. I feel like there are sort of loving renditions. So I've painted a lot of sort of dead birds and beetles and bugs and flowers. Those are all things that I love to paint. It's a long answer, but
Yeah, no, no, no. It's fascinating answer, and it gives real insight into what motivates you. Do you know the 17th century Dutch painter Fabricius? He was in Rembrandt's circle, never as famous. He painted his most famous work is Goldfinch on a Chain. It's a
oh
gray
yes, yes,
wall
yes,
like this, a gray glass.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. This is, you know. I try to be honest when I say something like this about an artist that I'm meeting and talking with for the first time. But this is really that kind of painting, just the simple gray wall, the meticulous representation, but it's a transformative image. I love the way you made the shadows of the insect's legs. the little thing like that that makes it so much more concrete, so much more real. But it's a beautiful painting. And it's just when I saw it on your website this afternoon, I thought we have to look at that because we're going all the way from plein air to studio nudes to Beatles. So I think you got a lot to bring to your work at Paint Annapolis, and I hope a lot of people will see this. And, you know, you can take this film once Marissa sends you a copy of it, and you can do whatever you want with it. Share it
Thank
however
you.
you wish. But anyway, hope to see you in
I'm
June.
looking forward to talking with you
Thanks for
more
taking the time.
during the event. Oh, it's my pleasure. And thanks, Marissa, for putting us together. And yeah.